was late October, the air brittle with the promise of winter, and the last light of the day clung stubbornly to the horizon, as if even the sun was hesitant to leave this town to its shadows. I had driven for hours out of my way to see it a structure, whispered about in online forums and old ghost hunter blogs, never shown in photos except as blurred, distant silhouettes. The locals had long since buried its name under layers of silence, but to outsiders like me, that silence was an invitation. I parked at the edge of the cracked asphalt lot, weeds clawing up through fractures in the pavement. The building loomed ahead, a skeleton of brick and concrete. Its windows were mostly broken, hollow sockets staring into nothing, and above the entrance a faded sign still clung to rusted bolts. Asterisk St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, asterisk. The letters had peeled and curled, but they were still legible, like a tombstone that refused to wear away. I killed the engine, but even in silence the place hummed. Not with life, no electricity ran through those veins anymore, but with something older, something heavier, kind of silence that makes your ears ring as if the air itself is listening. I tightened my grip on my camera. This was what I came for, forgotten ruins, the hidden history of places people prefer not to remember. I'd been chasing abandoned buildings for years, because I thought they were haunted, but because each one carried a story, a memory, sometimes beautiful, sometimes tragic. This one, though, already felt different. The town had warned me. In the diner where I'd stopped earlier for coffee, the waitress had gone pale when I asked about the hospital. She told me quietly, glancing over her shoulder, that nobody went near it. Not teenagers, not thrill seekers, not even drifters looking for a roof. She said people who trespassed didn't stay long. Some left babbling nonsense. Some never came back. She insisted it wasn't just haunted, it was cursed. I had laughed as politely as I could, but her eyes never wavered. Now, standing in the dying light with that husk of a hospital looming before me, her warning no longer seemed like superstition. Main doors were chained, links thick with rust, padlocks fused into lumps of corroded metal. The glass was smeared with decades of grime, streaked where rain had run down in filthy rivers. I circled around, finding a side entrance where shards of glass still clung to their frame. Vines had crawled in through the opening, their roots tangled across the tiles like veins beneath pale skin. I ducked inside. The air hit me first stagnant, sour, thick with mold. But beneath it was something else, a staleness that didn't belong to wood or stone. It was the kind of air that had been breathed too many times, recycled endlessly. Like the lungs of the place were still expanding and contracting even after death. My flashlight cut through the dark. Beam dancing across flaking paint, and murals of nurses and cartoon animals were warped, peeling into grotesque masks. The silence deepened as I stepped farther inside, swallowing the sound of traffic, of wind. The world beyond those walls. Only my footsteps remained, echoing too loudly, as if the halls themselves wanted to remind me I was an intruder. Paper littered the floor, patient records, charts scribbled in fading ink, prescription notes. Wheelchair lay overturned against the wall, its wheels bent, one armrest broken clean off, and for Stan leaned nearby, metal rusted, the hook empty yet still suggestive of weight. At the nurse's station, clipboards and pens remained, scattered as though the staff had abandoned their posts mid-shift. One calendar still hung from the wall, the pages yellowed but legible. October 1992, no dates crossed out, no notes, just time abruptly stopped. My breath fogged in front of me, and I froze. Outside, it had been a mild night, warm even, but in here, the temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees. My flashlight flickered, the bulb whining faintly before steadying again. I cursed under my breath. Batteries were fresh. I checked them twice. The local stories came back to me, then patients dying during simple surgeries. Doctors breaking down, whispers of unauthorized experiments, urban legends I had assumed. But as the shadows pressed closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hospital itself had absorbed every cry, every last breath, every moment of terror. The hallway forked, one direction toward patient rooms, the other toward surgery. I hesitated. Common sense urged me to explore a few rooms, take some photos, then leave. But curiosity, the same reckless hunger that had brought me here, pulled me toward the surgical wing. Deeper I went, the colder it grew. Each step felt like wading into a pool of ice water. My beam caught the reflection of glass windows into observation rooms, their surfaces spider-webbed with cracks. I reached the heavy double doors of the operating theater and pressed. They resisted at first, hinges groaning as though the building itself objected to my entry. Inside, the air was heavier still, thick with a copper tang that had no right to linger after 30 years. Rows of seats arched above a central table once used for teaching surgeries. Dust coated everything, but the table gleamed faintly, its straps frayed and darkened. I froze, flashlight trembling in my grip. Those weren't stains from rust. I raised my camera, snapped a photo. The flash burst white, momentarily flooding the theater with artificial light. In that split second, I saw someone. Figure slouched in the seats above, head tilted too far to the side, watching me. When the darkness rushed back in, the seats were empty. I told myself I'd imagined it, that my brain had conjured shadows into shapes. But the air had shifted, heavier, expectant. I whispered naturally, as if the walls were tasting the sound before spitting it back. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed to run. But instead, I backed out carefully, step by step, until the doors closed behind me with a hollow thud. The hallway beyond was darker than before. My flashlight dimmed, buzzed, then steadied again. I adjusted my breathing, telling myself this was just decay, just the mind playing tricks. But the silence wasn't silence anymore, it was layered, humming faintly, like voices murmuring just out of reach. I forced myself forward, past more rooms, past murals of children with fading balloons, until I reached a door I hadn't planned to find. It stood at the end of the corridor, slightly ajar, heavy, metal, institutional. A sign hung crooked on the front, letters barely legible, asterisk psychiatric ward, asterisk. The hair on my arms rose. I should have walked past it, but I didn't. I pushed the door open. The ward smelled different. Not mold, not dust, something sharper, almost metallic, like old blood left too long in the air. The cells were small, narrow rooms with bolted beds and toilets. The walls were covered in scratches, names, numbers. Ramblings carved deep into plaster with desperate fingers. One phrase repeated over and over, etched into 3 different walls, asterisk they watch, asterisk. I leaned closer, tracing the letters with my flashlight. The gouges were deep, frantic. Whoever wrote them hadn't stopped until their fingers bled. And that's when I heard it, a hum low, vibrating. At first, I thought it was the building settling, but it swelled, spreading through the walls, threading into the floor. A chant, dozens of whispers weaving together into a sound I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. My breath quickened. I spun the beam across the ward, empty, silent, except for the hum. Then movement in the corner of my eye. I turned too late. A figure stood in the hallway behind me, tall, thin, dressed in white. It tilted its head, just as the shadow in the theater had. Its sleeves were soaked dark, the fabric clinging as though still wet. And then it vanished. The night had settled thick and heavy over the abandoned hospital. Outside, the Florida moon hung pale and bloated, its light struggling to pierce the grime-streaked windows. Inside, Eli's flashlight carved narrow tunnels through the suffocating dark. Dust drifted lazily in her beam, each mote glowing like a trapped soul, rising and falling with every shallow breath she took. Her instinct screamed at her to leave. Every journalist bone in her body warned her that she was too far in. But something stronger and gnawing hunger for the truth kept her moving forward. I told herself this trip was about photographs and evidence. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. It was about confronting the stories, dragging them from shadow into light, and maybe, just maybe, proving that she wasn't afraid of the things that had haunted her since childhood. Into a wide waiting room. Cracked linoleum floor was littered with overturned chairs and broken toys. A plastic fire truck, a teddy bear with one glass eye, a jigsaw puzzle, half finished as though a child had simply gotten up and never returned. The sight made Eli's chest tighten. Her camera clicked rapidly as she captured it all, the silence broken only by the staccato flash of the shutter. Then she froze. From somewhere deeper in the hospital came a faint sound, soft, rhythmic, unmistakable. The creak of footsteps, slow, deliberate, as though someone or something was pacing the length of a hall. Her breath hitched. She swung her flashlight toward the doorway, every muscle tensed. "Hello?" Her voice trembled, a whisper swallowed by the cavernous dark. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Her heartbeat filled her ears, her grip tightening on the flashlight until her knuckles whitened. Don't run, she told herself. Running makes you prey. She forced her legs to move. Step by step, she crossed the waiting room and slipped into the corridor beyond. The air grew colder, damp with a mildew that clung to her skin. The walls were streaked with peeling paint, exposing layers of faded green and yellow like the skin of something diseased. Her light swept across signs above doors. Asterisk, asterisk, radiology, pediatrics, surgical wing, asterisk, asterisk. She paused at each, considering, until something tugged at her. Gut, pediatrics, she couldn't explain it, only that the sight of that word seemed to demand her attention. The double doors creaked open with a sound that made her teeth ache. Inside, the air was heavier, thick with the sweet sour stench of rot. Rows of tiny hospital beds lined the walls, their sheets yellowed and stiff with time. Some beds still held small shapes beneath the covers. Mannequins perhaps, but Eli didn't dare check. She kept her distance, snapping photos quickly, her nerves pulled taut. Then she noticed it, a child's drawing taped to the far wall. Faded crayon lines showed a figure, a tall man with no face, standing beside stick-figured children. At the bottom, in childish scrawl, were the words, asterisk, asterisk, he watches at night, asterisk, asterisk. Eli's throat tightened. A sudden burst of static crackled through the silence. She spun around, searching, until she saw it, an old intercom speaker, rusted with age, flickering faintly with life. The static deepened into a distorted whisper. She couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was unmistakably human, soft, coaxing like someone speaking gently to a child. Her skin prickled. She raised her camera, snapping a shot of the speaker just as the whispering stopped. The silence was worse than the sound, and then she heard it, children's laughter. Light, playful, but distant, echoing as if carried on some hidden wind. It came from the hallway behind her. She turned, heart hammering, and caught a glimpse. In the corner of her eye, small shadows darted past the doorway, quick, fleeting like children playing hide and seek. "Hello," she called again, her voice cracking. "Is someone here?" The laughter cut off instantly. Her flashlight flickered, once, twice, and then steadied. When the beam cleared, she saw it. One of the tiny beds was no longer empty. Figure sat upright in it, a child, or what remained of one. Its skin was gray, its eye sockets hollow, its mouth stretched too wide in a grin that didn't belong to the living. Eli stumbled back, colliding with a tray stand. The clang echoed like a gunshot. When she looked again, the bed was empty. Her pulse roared in her ears. She needed air. She needed out. She staggered into the hallway, gripping the peeling walls for balance. Her flashlight beam quivered over a door marked nurse's quarters. Against her better judgment, she pushed it open. The room inside was small, suffocating. A single cot sat against the wall, the mattress sagging. Blankets neatly tucked as though waiting for someone's return. Beside it, a knitstand still held a pair of spectacles, a rosary, and a journal. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the journal. Its cover was cracked leather, brittle with age. She flipped it open, skimming the entries written in neat, looping handwriting. The children cry at night. They see things I cannot. They say the doctor comes when the lights go out, that he stands in the corner and waits. I have tried to comfort them, but I, too, feel him watching. God forgive me, I fear what I cannot see. Eli's breath caught. She turned the page. Tonight, I heard him myself, a man's footsteps in the hall long after everyone was asleep. I prayed it was only my mind, but the children whispered his name. They call him the Hollow Doctor. I do not know who he is or what. The journal slipped from Eli's fingers and thudded softly onto the cot. She backed away, shaking her head. A faint groan echoed through the room. The floorboards creaked. She turned toward the corner and froze. Something was there, tall, lean, cloaked, in shadows that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her heart. She couldn't see a face, only the outline of a doctor's coat, tattered and dark with stains. He didn't move. He only stood there, head tilted slightly, as though curious, watching. Her camera rose instinctively. The flash exploded in the dark, blinding her for an instant. When her vision cleared, the corner was empty, but the smell of rot lingered, stronger now, pressing down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She bolted from the room, the journal's words echoing in her mind, the Hollow Doctor. As she stumbled back into the main corridor, she realized she wasn't alone. The air shifted. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, spilling across the walls in jagged shapes. Somewhere in the darkness, the footsteps resumed slow, deliberate, and closer this time. She whispered to herself, a desperate mantra, just one more photo, just one more. But even she knew it was a lie. This place wasn't done with her yet. The hospital seemed endless, a labyrinth built to trap the living as much as to house the dead. Eli's flashlight bobbed in her trembling hand, every swing of the beam illuminating more ruin. Reminders that people had once trusted this place to heal them. Now it was a mausoleum. The footsteps followed her no matter which turn she took. Sometimes behind her, sometimes ahead. Always patient, always measured. She pressed her back against the wall, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Her camera strap dug into her neck, heavy with the weight of every photograph she had taken. Each one was proof that she had not imagined the whispers, the laughter, the shadows that did not belong. But proof of what? That she had walked willingly into hell. Her beam landed on a rusted sign half hanging from its mount. Asterisk, asterisk, surgical wing, asterisk, asterisk. The air here was different, denser, metallic, carrying the sharp tang of old blood that no number of decades could erase. Her shoes crunched on shattered glass as she stepped into the ward. Tables lay overturned, instruments scattered across the floor like bones of some long-dead animal. A cracked surgical light dangled overhead, swaying gently though there was no wind. Her stomach twisted. She tried to look away from the stains darkening the tiles, but her eyes kept dragging back, convinced they were fresh. On one of the walls, someone had scrawled words in a desperate hand. Asterisk, asterisk, do not let him cut you. Asterisk, asterisk. Her pulse spiked. The sound of metal clattering made her spin. A scalpel had fallen from one of the trays. She hadn't touched it. Eli lifted her camera, snapping the photo with shaking hands. The flash burst, and for an instant she saw him. The hollow doctor, standing across the room, his figure stretched unnaturally tall. A white coat draped in tatters, his head bowed so that the overhead light never touched his face. His hands glistened with something dark. Then he was gone. Eli's knees buckled, but she forced herself upright. She had to move. She stumbled through the surgical ward deeper and deeper, until she found a stairwell leading down. Basement. The heavy door shrieked as it opened. The smell hit her first mold, damp, and something fouler beneath. A rot that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. She descended, each step groaning under her weight. At the bottom, her light revealed rows of filing cabinets, patient records, hundreds of them. She tugged one drawer open, the metal shrieking, and pulled a file. The photograph of a young boy stared back at her. His eyes were hollow, his smile strained. Scrawled across the notes were words that made Eli's blood run cold. Asterisk, experimental procedure. Subject did not survive. Asterisk. Her hand shook as she grabbed another file. And another. Each one the same children, women. Men all listed as subjects. All marked asterisk failed. Asterisk. She realized then what this hospital had been hiding. It hadn't just been abandoned. It had been erased. The sound of footsteps returned, louder now, echoing off the low ceiling. She dropped the files, their pages fluttering like dying birds, and backed against the cabinets. Who are you? She choked out. Her voice cracked. What do you want? Silence. Then the intercom crackled to life above her, though it was nothing but exposed wires. A voice oozed through the static, calm and steady. The voice of a physician delivering a diagnosis. Asterisk, scalpel. Retractor. Prepare the patient. Asterisk. Eli's scream caught in her throat as shadows spilled across the basement, coalescing into his form. The hollow doctor stepped forward, his faceless head lifting at last. What stared back at her was not absence, but a swirling void, an emptiness that pulled at the edges of her mind. Her flashlight sputtered and died. Darkness swallowed her whole. She ran, blind, frantic, crashing into walls and cabinets, hands clawing for an exit that wasn't there. The air thickened, growing heavier, pressing her lungs until every breath was a battle. Behind her, the footsteps followed, unhurried, inevitable. Her camera swung wildly against her chest. She seized it, lifting it like a weapon, and slammed the shutter. Flash! For a split second, light illuminated the basement. The hollow doctor was inches from her, his gloved hand reaching, a scalpel gleaming. Flash! Closer still, his presence bending the air, pressing against her ribs. Flash! The scalpel hovered at her throat. Her last photo burned white, and then the light was gone. When the flash faded, so did her scream. The hospital fell silent once more. Hours later, the building stood as it always had, quiet, decaying, forgotten. But if anyone dared to enter and follow the halls to the basement, they would find a camera lying in the dust. Its film held a final photograph, blurry, distorted, but clear enough to see the outline of a doctor in a blood-stained coat, and beside him the terrified face of a woman, mouth open in a scream that had never reached the air. Eli never came out of Willow Creek, and now the hospital waits for the next visitor.